Hey everybody, and welcome to the secret history of living in your aquarium. So today we're going to be talking about lemon plecos. So this right here is an L144 lemon pleco. Are you going to come out and say hi? So he's got silver to blue eyes, and it's not known for sure what mutation caused this fish. So let's start back. This pleco has an interesting history that is different from a lot of the other Ancistrus cirrhosis plecos. So, unlike the big rubber lip plecos and things like that, this pleco only gets around 5 to 6 inches at most. And oftentimes it'll actually stay smaller than that. Now, this male is guarding his eggs, and I have taken some of his babies because I'm a jerk, frankly. No, because they're going to hatch downstairs in safety. But you can see he's got those big onodontodes, which are kind of whiskers. They're fleshy protrusions that it's believed probably have some significance in functionality in sensing the water pressure, the water movement, maybe even some sort of scent gland type thing going on. And then you can also make out his lateral line, which runs right down here, and he's kind of an armored scale catfish. And so we can see that he has a mutation in him that allows us to see through his fins. You see the clarity, the translucency in the fins. So we're going to talk in the second half a little bit more about breeding or spawning these plecos, but in the beginning, let's just go over the basic info, and I'll try to keep this short and sweet, unlike most of my videos that are bitter and deep and nerdy. So first of all, it's likely a form of leucistic mutation, which would be similar to albino. For most people, you'd think of it that way. But it's a lack of the dark pigment, and they still keep the reds and the oranges out of their chromatophores, or their pigmentation cells. It could also be an amelanistic mutation. We don't know for sure because the eye is blue. Now, amelanistic means that essentially there's no melatonin in the skin, but the other colors are present. So that usually turns up actually more like this, which is another male, and this is it looks like an albino, right? But it's got blue eyes. So this is amelanistic, which means no melanin, which causes the dark coloration in skin in all sorts of animals. So we see it in humans. If you go to Africa or Papua New Guinea or any place along the equator, people tend to have darker skin there, whereas in the Arctic or in the subarctic, they tend to lighten up in skin color. And that has to do with absorbing the heat waves and the UV waves of light when you're that close to the sun, in intense sun half the day, 12 hours a day, all year long, as opposed to being, up by the North Pole or up away from that, where you don't have that. So instead of having any of those issues, these fish would easily sunburn, most likely. And so that's one strike against them occurring in the wild. However, they do occur in the wild as one-offs, but they also stand out very strongly, and so they don't tend to survive very long. Now, I have to show you a whole other pleco strain before I can really compare what we have here. So what you see him doing, let me point out, with his fins, is he's actually making water current flow out of the cave that he's got his babies in. This is the male. And after the female, here's the female right here. After the female, they do a courting ritual, and he traps her in the cave, and then he blocks it off. She lays her eggs, and he fertilizes them, and then guards the cave for a week or two. It depends on the species, depends on the temperature, but anywhere from 5 days to probably 12 days is a good range to say. And he'll block these babies from coming out, because right now they are wigglers, and they have little tails, a spinal column, a stomach and eyes, but they also still have their yolk, their little yolk sacs. So that's where they're getting their nourishment. They don't need to come out and hunt or anything like that. And this is an extremely yellow male right here. If this weren't a video and I had the contrast right, you would definitely see that this is more than even like a banana yellow. It's almost an orange color, as compared to, oftentimes these are even referred to as the same L144s. So sometimes they're called L144As, and that would stand for albino. That's a misnomer. Or if it's a lowercase a, it's an L144, which is standing for the type of mutation A, which would be amelanistic or leucistic, something like that. And there could be a melanistic version that's pitch black, that has too much melanin in its skin. So these are all just naturally occurring mutations that are rare, and we found them in this hobby when we imported them from Paraguay in the year 1991. A shipment came in from Paraguay and came into the US, and there was a beautiful yellow specimen. Well, that male was then bred back with some albino and leucistic versions that were in captivity already, like that one we just saw, and I'm looking to see if we can find any others right at the moment. And they were bred back with their own young, and then those young, the most yellow of them, were bred back, and so forth and so on, until that original male either had babies or grandbabies or great-great-grandbabies that were just as yellow or more yellow as he was, and females as well. And so there could be some health issues there potentially when you do that. But for the most part, this is a very healthy fish, peaceful fish, and it's been a stable line since the early 1990s, and it was all pretty much hammered out by the mid to late 90s. We had the set phenotype, or the outward projection of what that gene mutation looks like. Now we also have long fin versions of this, and for some reason the longer fin versions tend to be a little less vivid. It may be that there's something associated, as you can see, with the blue-eyed albino as they go by, but they're actually an amelanistic, as we discussed. It's not that they have no pigment, it's that they don't have their dark pigmentations. So they don't have their green, their black, their brown. They just have that clear, the white, light reds, light yellows, and oranges. When they are amelanistic, they have no melanin, no darkness, and then the leucistic is the yellowish color. So think of it as amelanistic, blue eyes, and albino looking. True albino, red eyes, and leucistic is anything that's yellow, like a corn snake has stripes on it. Now there's also other names and variants. There's 4 other albino and leucistic variants, and we won't go into that right now because it gets more complex, but at a very surface level, that is the science behind them, and that is why we don't see them coming from the wild. You'll never see a wild-caught L144, which is kind of a misnomer because that's supposed to be a species. Now, it's kind of been lost to time what exactly that first cirrhosis or Ancistrus cirrhosis looks like in the Loricaridae family. So we have all these L numbers up to, I think we're almost to 900 now, different species in Loricaridae. So you've got everything from, zebra plecos, leopard frog plecos, green phantoms, blue phantoms, spotlight, gold nugget, you name it. And they run the gamut in that species, in species and in traits. And a lot of times it's hard to draw the line. Where is it a new species versus, it's just like looking at a kitten. When is it just a yellow, an orange tabby versus a calico kitten, but the same, species and everything. So that part is hard, and it depends on more DNA testing we need to do, as well as little things like how many rays are on their dorsal fin, or, the kind of whiskers they have and protrusions and different glands and things like that may differ. But let's hop downstairs. So we're going to walk on downstairs. We're going to look at the other fish, and we're going to look at the fry of these guys, and they like to stay in tank water that's actually a little cooler, because Paraguay, while it is right near the equator, it is a bit cooler than some of the other regions, like the heart of the Amazon down in the lowlands. Paraguay has some foothills, and it also kind of reaches out similar to the Rio Negro or the Orinoco River, in that it has some cooler spots. Same with Colombia. And so in Colombia, you'll find other fish that like cooler water. And when I say cooler, I mean 66, 67, 68 degrees. That is not uncommon in the cool season, which is the reverse of us in the northern hemisphere. Now, these babies here are long fin. They have the father that was the albino looking one with the blue eyes. He's not albino, remember, because he would have pink eyes, which is actually just the blood showing through. But these ones are similarly related, but a little different. So they're different morphs of the same original fish, most likely. But what makes it even more confusing is people have crossed them with several other species of fish. And so right now I want to show you, these are the babies that are only a few days old. These babies are teeny. They still have their yolk sac. You can see they're going to have the blue eyes, and right now their color isn't filled in yet, and that yolk isn't really an indication of the color they'll be either, but they just don't need actual food really much until that yolk sac is gone. That has all the protein and nutrients they would need. Now these fish, once they do reach the size that they no longer have their yolk sac, you'll see them cruising around much like these other Ancistrus in here, the amelanistic ones here with the blue eyes, the blue eye albinos, and they will be eating biofilm. They'll be eating algae. They'll be eating aufwuchs and just little things that are on the side of your tank, as well as scavenging any sort of food particles that fall to the bottom that other fish don't eat. So that's why I keep them with the shrimp and the snails when they're really young, because they won't harm them, and they actually do a really good job of eating very similar junky, molmy kind of stuff. Now, if we look down here, we'll see another variation known as the green dragon, and it comes in a long fin and a short fin variety too. Here we have a longer fin variety, and if we move a couple things around, I'm sure we will find some of the other plecos in here that are the green dragons as well. Here we go. So some of them have this mottled, darker look, but these are also Ancistrus Plecos, Ancistrus cirrhosis, and they're also Loricaridae, but they're known as green dragons, and they are a man-made creation in that they are a natural mutation that occurred in a shipment and then was selected for. And they share a common ancestor, but the problem is we don't know if anything else was bred in with these fish. So we just don't know 100% what species. You know, there could be an L138 or something. That's not the number, but there could be another species tied in. Now here we have another one that's hiding a bit more, a little harder to see, but you can see it really has the actual green colorations that people want in a green dragon. Sometimes you get the cream colors and marbling, so you still get these color variations, and people select for these color variations as time goes on. So this is their grow out tank. Here you can see some little bit larger of the blue-eyed albinos, and the other Ancistrus seem to generally like it. We call these bristlenose plecos. All these from super reds to snow whites to long fin, short fin, whatever it may be, we tend to just call them bristlenose or bushy nose plecos, and that covers a big swath of them. But now it's a debate whether they're different species, different L numbers, different subspecies, or whether they're all the same species and just different human variations that have been selected for rather quickly since the 80s and 90s. And we still have new morphs coming out all the time, like the snow white longfin is probably one of the newer ones, or the calico reds. So I just wanted to show you guys this. They like water that is slightly acidic to neutral. So pH between 6 and 7.5 is just fine. They can take all the way down to probably a 5.0 pH, but they do like a little bit less acidic than that because bacteria and fungi and things like that tend to grow a little bit better, and that's what they like to eat, although that does increase their risk of infection. Now, the green dragons and the super reds, they actually tend to like a little bit hotter heat also than the original yellow and albino ones. And they can withstand up into the low 80s. They all can withstand it for a while, but they can actually breed, and that's what they like. And to get them to breed, to get them to spawn, what you're going to do is you're going to let the water evaporate out of the tank or take a little bit out each day. And then with the parents separated for a while, the male and the female, and the males will have kind of a consistent long shape like this, like a long drip shape, whereas the females generally have a very rounded head, like this gal up here, and a short stubby body that looks like a teardrop upside down, if you're looking at their head as the bottom of the teardrop, if you look at them upside down. So it's not surefire at this age by any means, but likely that will be a female because of the wide head and the fat body that comes to a very abrupt ending, whereas these are wider all the way down through the tail. The tail is meatier, and that's similar to the males, because the males will forego eating and guard the cave for sometimes up to a month when they hatch the egg, or when they lay the eggs for 3 to 8 days depending on metabolism and temperature, and then after that they guard the eggs unless I come in and steal them. So you're going to want to give them little hides. The best kind of hides are usually the ones that they pick, so you can't really force them with one, but I mean, if you've got a little pot like this, or one of the foreign Pleco caves, they work great. And you know, even just a rock ledge, like up in here, this is where some of my most prolific Ancistrus spawn. You know, I'll just give them lots of hiding space. Right now I'm treating some blackbeard algae, so don't worry about that. But giving some hiding space and then a rockery for them to hide in. And you want to keep the water fairly clean. They don't need good visibility in the water or anything, but they do like a good oxygen level in the water. And as I said, you can keep the yellow and the white ones in a bit cooler water. 66 to 76 or 78 is the range I would recommend. And when you want to spawn them, you drop the water, like I said, so they can feel with all those onodontode sensors and lateral line organs that the water is decreasing. And then all of a sudden, you add cool water, and it replicates the rains, the giant rains that come during the wet season in the equatorial regions, and specifically all the Loricariidae species are from South America. So all those L species, including outside of them, you know, the Cory catfish also, they respond this same exact way to breeding, except they lay eggs in clutches out on the glass. So, and they don't tend their eggs like these Plecos do. Plecos will guard their eggs, and they will get territorial if they have eggs, or if they've established a cave, they can get a bit violent. However, Ancistrus, bristlenose Plecos in general, like the one upstairs, he is a sweetie pie, and he is not at all a violent Pleco. He's very laid back, and he hasn't ever fought anyone, whereas some of my green dragons definitely have. So they do have personalities. They do prefer different caves. It just depends. Here's that blue eye again. And I highly recommend them as the next step into breeding fish. If you've never spawned them before, if you've never spawned anything that lays eggs, they're a great start. You're just going to want at least a 20 gallon, and that's if they stay on the smaller end. These ones are a few years old, and they've stayed under 4 inches. However, they can easily get much bigger, and you're going to feed them a mostly vegetarian diet. They don't just eat wood and algae. They do like having fiber and tannins in their diet, but you need to keep it well-rounded, maybe 70% vegetation or 60% vegetation, 20% fiber and like the stalks and stems or wood for them to munch on, and then 10-20% meat and things that have fallen, like flake food and other proteins kind of mixed in. They're scavengers, so they'll clean a little bit of algae, especially when they're young. They'll clean a lot of algae, but then they phase out of that and they are more laid back, and they kind of hide in the daytime usually, and will come out at night at sunset or if the light is dim, and they'll come out and they'll scavenge for anything that's sitting particle matter wise, and they'll clean up your tank for you. So they're definitely a good cleanup crew. So I've talked your ear off plenty here. The TDS doesn't matter a whole lot. I would keep it under 300 just as a rule of thumb, because that means you're keeping the water clean and it's not too rich in calcium. Also, don't treat the water with too much of the dechlorinators, in that sometimes if you're doing double, triple dose of it, just thinking you're being safe, you actually make a film on the membrane of the eggs, and they can sometimes have a hard time hatching from their egg. And sometimes when that happens, you can see they get stuck in there and get smushed because they outgrow the size of their egg chamber. And so you'll have to actually grab the babies out of the roof of the cave where they're laid and put them in a vial. Hold that vial deep underwater, as deep as a tank you have, so it has that pressure, a foot or two of water pressure, and then you put them in the vial, close it so that pressure's closed in there, and then you can put them in your pocket, or you can gently shake them every so often, hoping to kind of burst open that membrane. That's a little trick that Gary Lang told me, who's the rainbow fish king. So that's what I've got to say, you guys. I hope this introduces you to the lemon pleco, as well as the albino blue-eyed pleco, and all the L144 variants, as well as the bristlenose variants. They're really fun to take care of, and if this was helpful, please like, comment, pass it on, let me know. If you have any tricks or tips for breeding these guys, or if you've seen some cool mutations. All my green dragon plecos have purple eyes now. They had a mutation. So little things like that occur in the lines, and then we decide if we keep them and as fish keepers, and try to figure out if they're dominant or if we need to crossbreed generationally to get them to resurface with their own offspring. And that's what we did with the lemon pleco, not me, but whoever brought it in from Paraguay in 1991. So if you know what that original Ancistrus cirrhosis looked like, the bushy-nosed pleco L144 Loricaridae, I would love to see a picture if anybody has it from the early 90s, but I can't dig it up. So that's all I've got, guys. Take care of yourself, your tanks, and the people around you, and the critters in your tanks. And if half of us do that half the time, we'll have a world that is twice as good. Take care. If you want to support the channel, there's links below. And there's also links where you can buy these wonderful fish at a great price, sustainably sourced, and from some of the highest quality breeders in the country, Aquatic Arts and their network of breeders in the U.S. I will talk to you guys later. Have a good one. Bye.